Welcome to the Music Maker's Cookbook, the podcast that helps independent artists cook up recipes for success in the music industry. I'm Sean.
I'm Brandon.
And Brandon, you are a guitarist in terms of what your instrument is aside from being a studio engineer.
That is correct.
The quick question I want to ask, specifically for you and for anybody listening, is if you were to learn any other instrument other than your main instrument that you would want to become your main instrument, what would it be?
Piano.
Really?
Yeah.
There's no hesitation.
No hesitation. Yeah. You can just do so much with piano, especially with today's technology. You can be a guitarist on the piano, which is really cool. You can do a lot of different things. And I think it's fundamentally rooted as like the most music theory friendly instrument too. It's easiest to learn on. Yep, yeah. Exactly. And you can just do so much with it, especially with the expressions and the pedals and whatnot. So no hesitation. Piano, 100%.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Initially, I was going to be like, well, my main one's bass, but I would love to be a drum, get really good on drums because of how much it can add to a song.
Totally.
But at the same time, no, you're right.
Piano is pretty dominant. Yeah, that is a mammoth instrument right there. But the drums are great too. And it kind of makes sense though, because, your bassist, part of rhythm section, wanting to learn the drums would actually be beneficial, Guitar being maybe more melodic, in the long run of things, right? I guess there could be an argument made depending on how you're playing.
Technically, piano is a percussive instrument.
It's true, but there's a lot of melody that kind of goes into it too, though. So it's like you can do a lot with that, So, they kind of both go hand in hand in a weird way. But yeah, piano for me, for sure. Just a dominant.
Yeah. And part of the reason you're saying this is because you are an audio engineer, you are a studio engineer.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And it's because of the utility that it has in the studio.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's fair. That plays a factor into why I think, for me as well, I think piano is the right answer for this situation.
There is no right answer, but there is a right answer.
There is for dumb, stupid, piece of shit audio engineers.
That's right. Which is what we're going to talk about today. And why specifically studio engineers suck.
Yes, but we still need them.
We do, unfortunately.
So Brandon, just before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about what exactly studio engineers do. Because, as one, we've had a lot of kind of expectation thrown at us when people walk in for the first time, or people send us files or whatnot to, read. I've gotten hit up by people sending me files like, hey, can you compose on top of this, or throw this thing on, or change the tone, the pitch of this or tone of this, or can you make this longer or shorter? And it's like, well, technically all of these are kind of possible.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the right way to do it, or the thing that makes an audio engineer an audio engineer.
Totally. Yeah. Here comes a big episode that's going to be all bias coming from us. So, what don't studio engineers do at this point? The lines have been continuously blurred over the past decade or so. At the core fundamental, our job is to capture the performance within a recording studio and controlled sound situation to make it replicable and listenable to consumers out once you release your music, and capture it in the best way possible, depending on what that is. That could either be fidelity or that could be to your preferences, right?
Yeah.
That is really the core fundamental of our job, and we use science and a lot of creative tricks to do that and facilitate these sessions. But really, we do a lot psychologically, physics-oriented stuff. If you make coffee, chemistry, electronically.
Brandon's Walter White.
Just saying, a nice cup of brew. Yeah.
We're both
from our yeah, no, of course, right? The one day I'll put that right there. There you go. From my beautiful Keurig, so I'm not really actually doing anything. It's really sad. You didn't have to know that, but I gave it away anyways. But really, we're also project managers. We facilitate a lot and see over the projects, right? We are time managers, not only for ourselves, but sometimes for the client themselves, right? We sometimes help with the distribution, right? At the core fundamental, though, we do just what I just said, is that we try to capture the best performance possible from the musician in a controlled sound environment to make it listenable to other people and do it in the best way that we can, whatever way that kind of goes.
Even quicker of a summary.
Yeah.
We help you sound good.
That's even better. No, seriously. Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal.
Everything underneath it falls into that.
Exactly.
And there's so many stories throughout history where there's so many stories throughout the music industry of artists that have changed the sound of genres and of a decade and of like the generation, like things that happen that just get everyone excited about the sounds and the tones and how that all works. But a lot of these stories, at least aside from the small knit community of audio engineers, the recording aspect of it, those techniques that help bring it to the people aren't as well discoverable because you don't see it.
Yeah.
You know, the audio engineer, like, their job is kind of like a hidden thing to the end consumer, the fan, the artist. There's the performance in the middle of the mixing and mastering engineer. Like this is part of the performance and how everything's carved and put together and glued to make that sound. Just as much as a guitar player, that's a performance. Just as much as a vocalist, that's a performance, but it's hidden. Right. And that's complete. That's how it is. That's fine. That's how it should be, honestly. But a lot of times you see the artist, see the tone, you hear what they're putting out there, and it's like, whoa, this is like, how did they come up with that? It's all their idea.
Yeah.
There is a step in the middle, and that's where we live.
Yeah. Yeah. We're that middle ground and try to make it translate to the end user at that point.
But it's played a huge impact on the industry. Like historically,
Absolutely.
like the people that, like the things that do happen in here are very important, which is why we're going to, as we talk about like why you need it, like why audio engineers are necessary, even though we really do suck, is because like when allowed to have that creativity in the studio, it's that combination of knowledge helps make these things happen.
Yeah.
It helps make the magic happen. So yeah, that's what audio engineer is. That's how we've affected music throughout history. And we're still trying to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. New engineers every day, new ideas every day, which is awesome. Always come to the scene. It used to be back in the day where you had a very select few engineers maybe in the studio. It definitely wasn't as prevalent. The gear was more expensive. The knowledge was harder to obtain. There wasn't as many resources out there. And the technology was limited at the time too. Just in terms of like its capabilities. We've progressed to a point though where we've gotten everything down to a consumer-based level where almost anybody can start up their own studio, so to speak. So knowledge has become the knowledge has become the creme de la creme, right? It's become the demand at this point, I would say. Having that knowledge of how to capture a certain sound, get a certain sound, knowledge of how all the instruments work together or whatever the case may be is definitely the priority, I would say, these days, right? So that's kind of like why we're important these days, right? It's more focused on knowledge, but that's great though, because there's also
Well, I'm going
to go into this next. I'm going to go
okay.
Because I'm still on the importance of why we're here, right?
Yeah.
But why do we suck though? Why do we suck?
Multiple reasons.
I would say so. Yeah.
For starters, a good engineer, a good studio engineer, is usually expensive.
Yeah.
You're paying anywhere from $50 to $120 or more per hour for studio time, whether you're paying $250 or more for a mix, $25 to $100 in that range for mastering per song. Like this adds up real quick, and especially when you're kind of starting off and making it on your own and you're being an independent musician, these front costs to get your album out, not including promotion, not including publishing, not including all the other stuff that goes into getting your song out there, like planning for your tour, getting the merch for, hiring the bandmates, hiring session musicians, like all that stuff. It's an added cost that it's like, well, I gotta focus, right? I have a microphone, I can record this at home. I don't need to go into a studio. Because it's fucking expensive. It's
very, very expensive. But that's why though, is because of the expertise that you're kind of getting on the back half of it. And the equipment, right? The equipment matters too, right? We should have maybe better equipment than maybe our client has at home, right? That should be the ideal way to do it. But you're mainly paying for the expertise, maybe for the room itself, right? That's why it costs so much to do this. Overhead can be extremely high, you know, from the standpoint of an engineer, but also like the experience is extremely expensive too, right? So like all those things kind of culminate into why this costs so much money. It's not that we're trying to grab and make an opportunity off of your music. It's just that we have the knowledge to get you from point A to point B, or at least should have the knowledge, right? I'm not saying that every engineer out there is perfect. I'm not perfect by any means, right? but there's a perfect engineer for you out there, right? But that's beyond the scope of why we cost so much, I guess.
Yeah. No, and the main thing is, like, we do understand that it's frustrating, and even if it, like, because yeah, like, the cost of living is going up, food's more expensive, travel's more expensive, everything is just going up and up and up, and having music be one of the things that, you know, is supposed to be fun and for the people and an expression of yourself, like, it's a lot to then be thinking, like, why is this a hefty price tag attached to art just to get it out there? It's a lot better nowadays, as I mentioned, like, with all these just cheap stuff to get into it, but even then, even if you want to go your own route and try to be your own engineer, there's still cost to that.
Absolutely.
And that can suck. Like, why is it so expensive to get music out there?
Yeah.
But, you know, unfortunately, it's just kind of what it can be.
Yeah. You reminded me of that diagram. That's like the whole process of making a song. And then it's like at the end, it's like 99 cents, you know, to buy it off of iTunes, and then like $10 earbuds, you know? So it's like the end goal is that right there. Right. But going into it is all the costs associated with it. And like, when you look at it like that, it makes it seem like it's not worth it, but it's most definitely worth doing, you know, at some point, especially if you're trying to make a career in this, right? That is just the upfront cost that you're going to be paying, right? And whether you go into this or you go into doing HVAC or something, you're still paying an upfront cost because you have to go to school, you have to get certified for it, right? This is just the way of doing it. Maybe it's more of a guarantee at the end of the day, right? For maybe some kind of skilled trade job or, you know, white collar job or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is just the cost associated with doing business, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, for sure. Another reason why audio engineers suck in the studio is that even once you get in there, a lot of times it can be a very blunt environment. There's like the stereotype of the old audio engineer, the old guy who's just grumpy and mean. This is more of a live audio engineer kind of stereotype, but it does kind of exist in the studio to a degree.
Absolutely.
More in the just that, hey, that take sucked, do it again.
Yep.
Hey, you fucked that up, do it again. Just very, very blunt and almost can be methodical about the performance and the music. And that can be very disheartening, and it can kind of suck when you're in it. Just like, man, I've already done 10 takes. Why do I have to do this vocal again? It's like, hey, you fucked that up, do it again. Hey, you messed it up, do it again.
Yeah.
Hey, that didn't sound good, rewrite it. And it can be, you know, really fucking hard.
Yeah, it can be really, really hard, especially when, you know, you're being vulnerable and playing your music in front of somebody for the first time. It can be very, very demoralizing and almost discouraging at a certain point. That's why, you know, these days there's a lot of competition out there. You have to find the right engineer that's right for you, right? So like if you need to be spoken to a certain way and you're like, hey, I don't like being told that I fucking suck 35 times a day, then there are other people that can get you there that will deliver the information better to you, right? So now you're just kind of like, they're kind of gonna have to float and find the right person that's right for you. Unfortunately, this blunt feedback often leads to doing more takes, which leads to costing more money, right? So now there's
back to cost again. That sucks.
Exactly. So now it's like one of those things where this blunt feedback can also be very helpful, though, in terms of like, I need to make sure that I'm solid to a click before I come into the studio. I need to make sure that my song is good, so I don't have to sit there and try to fucking rewrite what chord progression that I'm doing here, or that it flows well, right? So there's a good side to blunt feedback, right? But oftentimes engineers are associated with that blunt feedback, and that is pretty well earned, I think, for engineers, because through my experience that at other studios, like, it does get like that sometimes, you know, especially when you are working long hours, which we will get to later. You know, and as you become more comfortable with people, you start letting your customer service side go a little bit, and you're just like, dude, just fucking redo this. Just redo this. You're not strumming hard enough. Fucking strum, right? Like, you're not going to hurt the guitar, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I would never speak. Yeah, I would try to never speak like that. You know, sometimes it might come off as snarky, where I'm like, hey, can you just redo this? Like, you're not going to hurt the guitar. Just strum. You know, like, even that's a little harsh for what I usually deliver. But yeah, it's like to each their own kind of thing. So yeah.
Well, even if they find the right engineer for them that is more open to trying new things, and has a good communicative talk, and like, he's, you know, good working, that not blunt or not mean about it and all that, there's still almost guaranteed to be creative differences
Absolutely.
between the person you're working with
Yep.
and yourself. And that sucks.
Yeah, that can majorly suck, and that can derail a whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
And where your vision all of a sudden becomes their vision, you know, whether it's, you know, maliciously or by accident, right? This has a lot to do with experience too, I feel too. So like the more experienced your engineer is, typically I think the better results that you can kind of get, but also you have to walk that fine line too of them being comfortable with them doing the same thing over and over again, where they're just putting in the time and trading for dollars at that point.
It's like, oh, I always do this this way, so that's how we're going to do it today. It's like, well, that's not how I want it.
Exactly. And then the exploration. Exactly. And then you bring up a great point though, because it's like now the engineer, right? Let's say you're paying $65 an hour to record, and the engineer is like, hey, I want to try this microphone out. You're like, well, I don't want you to try it out on my dime.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm here for 2 hours more. I want the song recorded and out by the time I'm done.
Exactly.
So I don't want to try different mics with you. I don't want to try different positionings with you.
Yep. And that's an inherent clash right there. Right. And that really has to do with communication, I guess, at that point. But that also means you can't be a clock watcher at the studio too, right? There's a delicate balance there. That's a really tough one. And that's a really great point to bring up, because like it can seem like the engineer being creative with themselves, with how they capture your art, that can add up to more costs. So there you go, back to cost again. Yep. So,
and also like the button the heads on it too, of like, I really want this to be more centered in the mix once everything's recorded. Like I actually just worked with a client who I sent back a mix, and they're like, it's great. I would like the cello to be in the center instead of, you know, off the side. I'm like, well, and I responded like, okay, we can give it a shot, but just to be aware, like you have a lot of low fullness in your vocal that bring the cello to the center. Now you have competing frequencies. The violins pan to the left, so now like I'm gonna have to move that. It's not like an unbalanced mix, and that's gonna adjust this and that. And just because at first I'm thinking this isn't gonna sound good if I do what you want. So I sent that back. I talked to them and said, hey, you know, just be aware this is probably gonna happen. And then they got back to me like, yep, okay, you know what, that's fair. Let's not do it then. And then I to pull off a second and be like, well, hold on. Why not at least try it? It's going to take me 5 minutes to do this.
Right.
To at least get it so we can listen to it.
Sure.
And if I do pan the cello center, then, okay, so it's competing with the vocals. Well, now if I sidechain the vocals so there's more clarity when the vocals hit versus when the cello's there, that opens up for there. And there's that kind of like the whole thought process of kind of creatively solving that problem. And then we did it. We tried it. And they were like, no, this is what I had in mind. This is what I wanted. This sounds more like my vision than the panned vision that I initially sent to them. And I just think both mixes are good. Both mixes are really good. It was just different. And the difference was more in line with what they wanted to be the case with their music. And that's a creative difference. And some engineers, you have to push for that. It's like, no, I want it centered. Figure it out. Because 9 times out of 10, there is a way to figure it out. And you can lean on their experience to be like, well, it's better if the cello's panned to the right and the violin's to the left, because, you know, when you have a string duet, like they're going to be kind of often set this way. In an orchestra setting, the low strings are on the right, and all these reasons, the technical knowledge, why they did it in the first place, that all exists. But if you challenge it, well, now they're pulling on more technical knowledge. So yeah, it can just be a thing.
100%. But I think like the thing that like your story illustrates really well is that you're very clear with your communication and your thought process to the client on why you were hesitant to do it, right?
Yes.
And that has a lot to do with it too, because, you know, engineers, sometimes they can not be good at communication, like, you know, especially studio engineers for sure. And as long as you're like kind of like having that conversation with your engineer, or the engineers having that conversation with you, the creative differences the barriers can kind of come down a little bit, right? And then not only does the engineer think the way that the client wants them to think, but now the client is also thinking in maybe more the way that the engineer is thinking, right? And now this whole puzzle is we're kind of starting to get on the same page, right? Now there are some points where that just doesn't happen, right? That's just the natural way of music itself, being a creative, right? Sometimes you just don't see the other person's vision. That's okay, because there are plenty of efficiency at that point, right? So, but yeah, creative differences can definitely be a big deterrent on why people don't work with each other, for sure. I mean, that's why your favorite band breaks up, was creative differences, right? Well, now, whether or not that's a label or not, that's a different story, right? But creative differences is usually the cause of it. What are you about to say?
Well, also, even though at the end of the day, we did try it, and it did get the closer sound that they wanted for their music.
Yeah.
For a second there, that conversation sowed doubt in that sound, in that song, in their vision of it. And that sucks. And even if it ends up working out at the end, that process of getting there can be hard.
Yeah.
Because now you're putting your music and how you want it to be under a microscope and really looking at the details of it. And it's not fun. Well, sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it sucks.
Yeah. Absolutely. I always like to say that, like, now that you just brought up doubt, like, I think doubts is best measured in the term of seeds, right? When you plant a seed of doubt, the thing that happens is that usually it sprouts, right? And it gets worse over time. So having these conversations can definitely sway somebody to not release their music, and really have a lot of doubt, especially depending on who you're talking to. And I think the same could probably go for engineers too, depending on where their status is in terms of professional, amateur, mid-tier, whatever. So always be cognizant of that too, because like Sean said, like having that little piece of doubt in there could sprout. That rhymed.
It did.
It bores. We're bored up. So yeah. So great point. Great point.
What's another thing that sucks about audio engineers?
Well, we kind of talked about it last point, but the time management kind of sucks. Let's be honest, like you go to a studio and nothing's set up yet, and that's okay. That's sometimes how it works, right? It all depends on who your engineer is and where it's at and what the time was before and what you guys agreed on. But time management is definitely a tough one because it takes a while to get set up. It takes a while to get these tones. It takes a while to get the right mic placement. It takes a while to even learn the song itself, right? This time, all of a sudden, you're spending an hour just getting set up, and you're like, damn, I just paid so-and-so, back to the cost again, right? Yeah. Where it's like, I just paid an hour, and we don't even have anything recorded. It's like, yeah, but that is like a part of the process, unfortunately. Like, we don't know what you're bringing into the studio, right? Like, whether you're bringing in a Martin acoustic, you're bringing a Taylor acoustic, whether it's Dreadnought, whether it's a grand auditorium, I have no clue, right? And that's all gonna, and like, whether you have new strings on there or not, or you don't, or you do, right? Like, that's just one tiny example, but there's a chain of reaction, that happens there. And we can't plan for that without hearing that first and knowing what your vision is at the end of the day as well. Because we have to plan for your vision, right? Like, so it takes a lot of time to do this, especially when you're paying for studio time and you're clock watching, right? I don't mean clock watching in a bad way, because it can be good sometimes, because there are engineers that can waste your fucking time.
Oh yeah, you gotta hold and be accountable to the project on time.
Exactly.
It is a project, and not just creative sense of like, this is what you're building together, but in a business sense as well. Like, there are deadlines, there are deliverables, things that have to be done. The last thing you want is for a lot of delays to push back the release of the album, because that could push back your tour, that could push back all the promotional materials going back, and that costs a lot of money, which further affects you. So sometimes, in order to get stuff done, there's long hours in the studio, and that can suck as well, especially when you've been there for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, and you've been singing and playing, you're just exhausted, and all of a sudden the engineer's like, all right, well, you got to do harmonies now.
Yeah, right.
Well, fuck,
right.
man.
Now we got to go back and do some more overdubs, right? Yeah, it's a taxing process. So that will also have to do with like how quickly your engineer can get set up, so you'll have to learn his kind of speed and workflow, right? That'll have to do with your pre-planning too, on what to bring to the studio and what to expect and what to practice too, because like practicing can save you so much time in the studio, so much time. And then you can get to the more fun creative parts, which is what we all strive for. But if we can't get the technical parts down, that's when it becomes a big issue, right? And now we are sitting here spending 6 hours on the guitar part because we can't play it, right?
Also, the thing that can even be perceived as sucking,
right,
is also like if you're in the studio and like you're recording guitars and you're all set up and your guitar's out there, and the engineer puts a couple mics on and he walks back and you play, and he walks back out and moves it back an inch, and he walks back, and he comes back in and he moves it down an inch, and walks back in the room, and then comes back again, has headphones on, the whole like time it takes during the setup, even while you're there, even if you had the mics ready, just getting it in the place for it. It can be like, well, come on, I got to play, get this done. And that can be, stressful to a degree.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. So yeah, now I guess the last point we have on here, but probably not the least point, like I'm sure you could probably come up with some that we just couldn't think of at the time.
Yeah, let us know why we suck.
Yeah. Please do. And let us know why Sean and I suck personally, actually, too.
Well, it's all kind of like how I'm a bass player and I shit on bass players.
Yeah.
like this is our open invitation for you to just shit on audio engineering.
Yeah.
Like,
And I'm
let's do it. Tell us everything.
And like Sean said at the beginning, I'm a guitarist, so I shit on everybody else besides guitars because that's the way that guitars. The last one is that we are filled with technical jargon, and not even technical too. We get weird with the way that we use our adjectives. We like things sounding creamy. We like things sounding like wood. We like things sounding brittle and brash, right?
Warm, crisp, muddy, dark, wide, bright, open.
Or back to the technical jargon,
distant,
right? Where it's like stems, multi-tracks. Those are different things, believe it or not. And I'm going to tell you that right now. They are fucking different things. And I always, I don't correct as much as I used to because like, I'm just like, at this point, it doesn't fucking matter, but they are different things.
And then the shorthand for it, just tracks, give me the tracks.
Exactly.
So go, wait a minute, tracks are like, on the album, each song is a track too. Because like, well, what the fuck?
Right.
There's a confusion there.
Yeah.
And then like, I need it in a lossless format versus, compressed format. Okay, well, what's that? What's, is this session in 48 kilobits per second?
I was going to say sample rate, depth, right?
All that stuff.
I need this turned up 3 decibel. And it's like, what the fuck is a decibel? You know? And that's just skimming the very basic bare bones. We go way further, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Fortunately for us, because we love it. But like, unfortunately for you, because you have to sit there and fucking listen to that shit. And it's fucking annoying after a certain point. It really is.
Especially the old sound guys. This is something that is both live and studio, is that if you are working with an old engineer, get ready for some stories.
Absolutely.
You will hear stories.
Because we're going to tell you exactly what we just worked on 5 minutes ago. And we're going to tell you what we worked on 2 months ago. And we're going to tell you what we worked on 8 years ago. You know, that's just the way that it goes.
And we're going to tell you what this other artist worked on 10 years ago and what this one engineer did for the thing. Like, oh yeah, I'm trying this because, this is how the Beatles recorded this and they used this microphone and this up and it sounds really, really cool. And they're just going to go on and on and on the technical aspects of it. And like, I had to switch into this cable because it's a long cable, so it's something got higher impedance.
So it's impedance talk. Yeah. Which is, oh my God, like they were really getting into it at this point, right?
And you can tell we like it because we're actually like the energy just picked up.
Yeah. But it's funny because
and
like
it's annoying.
It is. It's so annoying. It's so funny because like it's so true.
Right.
It's so true. Like one of the reasons why I'm laughing is because I'm laughing at myself because I say this shit. Like just yesterday I was like, okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do an over-the-shoulder recording of your acoustic, but we're also gonna run an AKG C414 in bidirectional mode, and I'm going to set up a cardioid mic, and that was an Audio Technica AT3035 right in front of you, so that way we can do a mid-side technique if we want to. Best part is if we don't like the mid-side, we can just take off the fucking bidirectional mic, and she was sitting there, she's like, okay, cool. I was like, sorry, like, I'm a nerd.
Love how we just said like, oh yeah, and like an old engineer is going to tell you stories about what they just did.
That's the shit I'm talking about. And that shit's annoying. You probably turned off the podcast if you didn't at this point. We thank you, but
because here's what I'll go down to. What now an engineer does? We make your music sound as best as we can. Everything you just list the technical jargon behind it.
Yeah.
The end goal was he made the recording sound as best as he could.
Exactly.
And it did turn out really, really good.
Thank you.
But all the stuff behind it, not necessary. And it can kind of suck when you're sitting there like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. It can take you out of the vibe of the music because you're just confused and thrown off and like, I don't care. I'm bored. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why we also do it too is to help fill that gap, right, between getting set up and then recording itself, right? I'm explaining to you why we're doing this, right? There's not just for shits and giggles, and I'm not just sitting there jerking off, right? Yeah. Like we are doing this for a specific reason, right? We're going for this specific sound. And bless her heart yesterday for sitting there and listening for me say this, right? But I wanted to make sure that she knew, like, I'm not just setting up microphones just for shits and giggles. Yeah. We're doing this for a legitimate purpose that we're going to use later on and have flexibility later on as well, right?
But at the same time, it can be intimidating.
It absolutely can
like,
be. That absolutely
am I supposed to know all this?
Yep.
Like, I don't. What? And just a little bit of a hint. Despite being in the studio and working with the engineer and like. Despite being in the studio and working with artists all the time and me doing live shows and working with artists all the time, like there's a lot that I don't know about what musicians talk about. So it goes both ways.
Oh, 100%.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, 100%.
So
yeah, totally.
In terms of like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's okay. There's jargon and all. There's jargon and slang and all over the music industry on every side of it, whichever way you want to look at it.
And like, I think there's like a responsibility on both parties right there. You know, it's like, maybe you should know a little bit more about recording in general, how microphones work and whatnot. But at the same time though, we should know what these terms mean to these musicians, right?
Mhm.
What does this amp sound like? What does this shell sound like on this kit, you know, or like what's the difference between shells, right, or something. We were just talking about that before we started today.
Mhm.
So it goes both ways. There's like a responsibility of learning on both sides of the aisle, you know,
Mhm.
and we do our best to actually take that in and be able to apply it to other situations, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I always try to make fun of myself too when I'm explaining, you know, why we're doing this the way we're doing it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just a nerd. Like, I
Mhm.
like you don't have to listen to me. Like, I'm just explaining like why. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just nerding out at
Oh,
this
yeah.
point. You know, and usually it's received with a nice giggle. You know, so it alleviates some stress. You know, but
Mhm.
this is what I'm talking about with the engineers, though, is that the technical jargon can be a lot, and we're using both sides of the brain as engineers. We're using the creative side and the technical side. The musician usually just falls into the creative side of things, and usually they should until it gets
During
to
the performance.
right during the performance.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. During the recording, during the performance, you know, it's usually that's why we're here, is to alleviate the technical side.
Mhm.
So we're not trying to bog you down with the technical side of things.
We're trying to rely on the practice. and, like,
We're
the
relying on the
repetition of it,
creativity
and
side of the
during
brain.
the
Yep.
performance. Like that's what we
Exactly.
want you to do, and we want to analyze it and be
Yep.
like, okay.
Yep.
Which leads into kind of another reason I'm shooting for when they're
Please,
audio
yeah.
engineers suck,
Mhm.
is that a lot of audio engineers are introverted and a little antisocial.
Yeah.
So
totally.
there will be awkward periods
Yeah.
between you and engineer when you're in the studio,
Mhm.
because we spend hours upon hours, day after day after day, all alone in a room,
Mhm.
adjusting small details about songs.
Yep.
And we'll listen to a single snare
Mhm.
for 5 minutes straight on a loop just to make sure it fits properly inside of the
Mhm.
mix.
Yep.
Literally a 10-second section of your song we will listen to for 5, 10, 15 minutes again and again and again until
Yep.
we get it to fit just right. There's something weird and broken about us.
Yes.
Okay?
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Some engineers, you know what? They're like more the producer side of it. They love partying. They love talking to people.
Yep.
Great. A lot of us don't. That's
Mhm.
why we're here. We don't
Mhm.
like, we love music, but we don't want to be on stage.
Right.
We don't want people to look at us. That's for you. And God bless you for doing that.
Yes,
and allowing
absolutely.
music to happen
Because
that
we
way.
need you so
Yes,
bad.
so bad.
So bad.
We don't want that. We want to build our little holes and have you come to us and make music with you so we can feel like we're doing something.
Exactly.
And there will be
exactly.
awkward periods of time.
Yep.
So
Yep. It's so funny you even say that because a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, can you perform with me? Do you want to play like on
I
this
don't get why that
like
happens.
live?" I'm like, "No."
I don't get why that
I'm
happens.
like, "I'm not a performer."
Oh,
Like,
you
that's
wrote
not-
this with me. And you have to perform with me.
Like,
You're
no,
part of the
I'm
band.
good.
No.
No, that's not my job. You know, like I was here to help, and that's about as far as it's going. Unfortunately for you, you know.
Or like, oh, you're gonna be my live engineer. No,
Yeah.
tour. I'm gonna go on this tour across the state, and you're gonna mix it for me. It's like, no,
Yeah.
like
No.
I like my hidey hole.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the dark room.
I made the lights pretty,
Right.
but
The
I
lights
feel
are
comfortable.
lights are beautiful, and there's candle.
And salt lamps.
And so
And
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for noticing.
I always notice.
Love
I
the
always
salt
notice your
lamp.
salt lamp.
I can't
Brandon.
compete with Tim's salt lamp, but I have salt lamps, so I have 4 of them to compete.
There you go.
You know, so that's
Yeah.
that's where the compensation comes from.
But yeah, we're a little weird, and just it can kind of suck when you're just like, come on, dude, let's vibe. It's like, well, I'm focused on this technical thing right now. My brain is otherwise occupied.
Yeah.
I'm in my zone of like, my creative zone isn't outward. My creative zone is inward.
Yeah.
That's my flow state. So if you're in your flow state and you're jamming and vibing and having a great time with the other artists in the room, my flow state is going to be
Yeah, exactly.
very different.
Shut the door,
Yeah.
and we're done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So just be aware of that. It sucks.
It does.
And it is what
It
it
does. Yeah,
But-
absolutely.
After hearing all this, you might be thinking, man, audio engineers are the worst. And you know what? We are.
It's true.
Yeah,
We suck,
we really do. But we're still kind of necessary.
unfortunately for you.
Unfortunately for you. Yeah. So, despite all the flaws and
Yeah.
the things that really are the worst about going into the studio and making music with an audio engineer, why would you still do it? Like, what's something that we do bring to the table that, despite the hardship and the flaws, can actually be beneficial for you and your music and your career?
Yep. Well, I was jerking us off along the way, saying this every single time. Expertise and skill. Expertise and skill.
I'm laughing because I can't stand at the table.
That's what I was doing along the entire way. I think I mentioned that every single point was the expertise and skill that we bring to the table. So I'm going to mention it again.
Yes.
Expertise and skill. Sean, you take it this one because I mentioned it so many fucking times at this point.
This is the actual segment where we're talking about the positive thing. We want to be like, no, trust me, we're not all bad. But like, this is the part where we actually have a shot to do.
Right. Give us a second. Yeah.
So if you work with the right engineer that's specific towards your genre and your kind of music, they know what it's supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to, and they have the knowledge of how to get it to sound a certain way.
Mhm.
And there's skill and expertise in doing that. So when you bring your music to the engineer and you want to sound like your inspirations, but have your unique twist on it, you need to know how to get there before you can kind of twist it on your own and make those stylistic choices. So that's really the big skill and expertise that's brought to the table. All the recording techniques to get like the mic above and the mid-side matrix, like all the nerdy shit that we will ramble on and on about, the jargon, that's is important to getting that best possible sound for your song. And that's what we bring.
Yep, absolutely. The next one is, and this one's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit tougher, everything is to find in some people, depending on where they're at in their career and how much they really, truly love this, right?
How much you know them.
Exactly. That too, is objectivity, right? Yeah. We should be objective in our position rather than subjective, but so that's the thing about music, is that it is also subjective. So we try to balance that objectivity and subjectivity at a certain point, right?
No.
But we can objectively say, yes, this was a good take. No, this was a bad take. Yes, you messed up here. No, this was fine, right? There's that staunch line right there where we can be objective and say, this was objectively good or this was objectively not it at this point. Now, like I said, there's a balance, because subjectivity is like when you bring a creative decision to the table, whether it's a good creative decision or not. Sometimes I'll use creative decision as like a bad thing, but a creative decision can just be anything that you bring to the table that is creative in nature. Let's say you want to put a lead over the specific part, that creative decision. Do you like this? Yeah, I could see it with it. I could see it without it. That's not super objective, but it's like, it all depends on how you want the song to feel. And that really has to do with you, right? So there is that little balance that you have to do there. But we try to bring the most objectivity to the table when it's the most prominent, right? And doesn't always leak into the subjectivity part. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense? Did I explain that?
It does. Yeah. I love how you brought up the objective or subjective aspect of it, because when I wrote it, I was thinking we bring the perspective of looking at a song objectively versus having any personal attachment to it.
Sure.
So the objective versus personal.
Totally. That too.
We didn't write your song. We didn't perform it. We don't know the backstory of what the words mean to you and all that behind it. So when you bring it, you're now asking for someone who has expertise in the field to look at it and be like, hey, for someone who's completely separated from it, who's out of the weeds, who can look at the whole forest, who's not in the woods, what works and what doesn't. Oh, yeah, it gets really messy here. You're going to want to either change this piano part, or we're going to have to cut some of the low end out of it. It's messing with the bass.
Yeah.
Or, hey, the vocals get a little busy here. You might want to change this one, or like, you're holding out this vowel a little long. Why don't you try this word or swap this up so it's a little sharper and more on the beat? All sorts of small things that I've done in the studio with artists multiple times, that you've done in the studio multiple times. There was a session I had a couple months ago where there's vocal performance and there's just one line that kept getting tripped up on, because it was like, for the part it was like 11 syllables, then the one line had 9 syllables, and the next one was 11 syllables. So there was a flow established, and then it got changed by the lyrics. Yeah. So I was like, hey, just an idea. Try recording one take by, instead of saying this word, say like these 2 words. Yeah. So that it matches the flow and the syllables of the other ones. And he did it. And he's like, oh yeah, no, that's easier to perform. That sounds better.
Totally.
And it goes to that, because there's not like, hey, like, I know you chose those words for a reason. It's like super personal to you. And because it matters to you, it's hard to then look at it and be like, okay, well, is this the best way of delivering it or doing it? When you go and talk to an audio engineer, there isn't that. They can say, try this, do that, look at this, try this technique, record it like this, go and do it in this way, move this around here, put this before that, like all the things that structurally affect the music, but in a non-personal way.
Totally. And like to Sean's point too, at this point, is like, it all depends on too, like your relationship with the engineer too. If it's your first time working together and he's just strictly engineering you, and that's the agreement between you guys, overstepping, I guess, like lack of a better way to say it, probably won't happen. They'll probably just let you run it and be like, hey, you have like some kind of timing issue here, maybe consider fixing that, right? But if you're going back to the studio weeks in a row, this guy for years, the engineer might even ask you, and where the kind of like the producer had at that point, right? Like I said, the lines get blurred really quickly right there these days, and be like, what does this song mean? Why does it mean this to you? What happened? And if they're willing to share that, then that becomes a little bit easier to kind of deal with, So it really all depends on the relationship you have with the engineer at that point. And I just wanted to add that in because that can absolutely be a nice aspect of things.
Well, I think that honestly, that's part of the separation between a cheap engineer or a new engineer versus an experienced engineer,
most
an
definitely
expensive one.
Yeah.
Because even if they're not stepping in the producer role, they should want to talk to you about what does your song mean?
Totally.
What's the story behind it? What's the emotion you're prevailing with it? Especially if you have a demo that you send beforehand, they can listen to it and be like, okay, well, when we record it,
Yep.
if this song is about like loss and whatnot, then we really need to like focus on taming those pianos because they're
Absolutely.
really
Soft
sharp in the
pianos.
demo.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this sound better represents the emotion behind the words and help emphasize with music. Because I mean, like, if you've watched a movie and like you have like the swells in music that like make, oh, I'm excited now, or oh, I'm sad now, or no, I'm happy now. Like scoring a film, music, the instrumental backing track plays a big role in how the emotion is perceived. Your song has a story, it has emotion, it has all that behind it as well. And an engineer, even if it's like aside from like a producing role, even if they just know like, okay, well, this is what I got. This is the emotion behind it. So I'm just going to use a faster attack so that it smooths out the transients so it sounds more pulled back for this sad song. These are questions that should be, asked and talked about. And if you are going to a really nice studio and paying a lot of money for it, even if it's your first time, I would say they're going to be the ones who are going to no bullshit you, or they bluntly say like, this is wrong for the song.
Totally agree. At least it should be. At least it should be. Like not knowing the story of this is the last point I'm going to make on this topic. Not knowing the point of the song, the story of the song, the theme of the song is like taking a test for a class that you never took, right? You don't know what's going into it. You know what kind of color palette you need. You don't know the information. You're just kind of fucking just going out there and putting shit together at that point. And that is just such a massive red flag. Don't do it kind of thing, right? So right. But this could also be a boundary thing too, right? So like there's the double side of it at this point. So your relationship with the engineer will obviously determine the objectivity and the subjectivity at the same time. So yeah, or it shouldn't at the same time, especially if you're paying a good amount of money too. So both sides of the aisle. But yeah,
that's one thing that a good engineer brings. Is objectivity. Moving on, technical proficiency. This kind of goes into like expertise and skill, but it kind of goes on. It's more the detail of it. Like the expertise and the skill was more kind of like broad of like, they know these genres, they know these songs, they know what your music's going to end up sounding like. Now it's like the technical proficiency of these are the tools. This is how I know how to get there, but also technical proficiency on your stuff as well. If they're in the studio or they're a live engineer, this kind of goes for both, but it's because they love gear and like the little details and the technical aspects of it. So if you have any question about anything that you have, odds are you can probably ask your engineer.
Absolutely.
And they'll be able to like help you out with it. At a last session, a guy brought his guitar in and he's like, I've never gotten the pickups on this acoustic guitar to work, but I'd like to play it live or whatever. You take a look at it. Took a look at it within 5 minutes. I had it working.
There you go.
And it's just because like I know what to look for because it's fun to me. It's interesting to me.
Totally.
The same thing goes like if you bring a pedal board or have problems or like a busted cable or whatnot. Like your technical skills are there, so utilize them. Same with like changing strings or changing drum heads or whatnot. Like, there's at least usually a basic knowledge of like, I'll help you out with that. I'll reset up your guitar, things like that, because they know that's important to get that perfect take.
Absolutely.
To get that sound. So they're going to be like, oh, hell yeah, you want to change your strings? Let's change your strings. Because that's going to make it sound better. And the whole goal, as I said, is to make your song sound as good as it possibly can.
Absolutely. Yep. Good problem solving skills right there. With the technical proficiencies. The last one, this one is kind of self-explanatory, but the studio you go to should probably have some professional equipment there. Some equipment that you might not be able to obtain on your own or have no desire to obtain on your own. This can include microphones, interfaces, boards, this computer, the room itself. Fuck.
That's the underrated one. The room
itself is really underrated.
The room itself.
Fuck. The bathroom. Like anything like professional, in there that helps you get your sound and helps you get from point A to point B and do it efficiently and sound really good at the end of the day, right? So yeah, professional equipment should be a standard for, the engineer that you're going to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if I should spend that much time on that topic because it's kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah. And also, but he's not just talking about like physical gear,
right?
Like, even like inside the DAW, inside the recording software, different plugins that are there to get certain kinds of sounds
and do different things with DAWs. Like if you're using Audacity versus Pro Tools, you're going to be able to do way more Pro Tools, at the end of the day. So yeah, good point. Excellent point with software too.
Because this professional equipment that they bring to the table, all it really does is allow you to experiment and dial in your sounds. So even aside from the technical things that we play with, like compressors and EQs and de-essers and things like that, some great studios have other things that you can play around with to try new sounds, like a collection of some other pedals that you can use when you're recording, or guitars or basses or different drums or snares, or like a lot of bigger studios have like a house kit that is more tuned probably for the genre you're doing if it's a niche studio. And it can be beneficial to use their kit because they've, they maintained it, and the drummer can play around with the sounds of that and kind of blend the two together or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
There's also equipment for you to mess around with. Like some of the guitars that you have here, and guitars that I have in my studio, artists are more than welcome to pick up and record with
Absolutely.
because they're going to be different tones than what they have. And it might better fit the song, and it might better fit what they want. Even if they just pick it up and noodle around with it while waiting while somebody else is recording, it might be inspired, like, oh, this sounds different. Oh, I could try this, and oh, cool, shit, I've got a new riff then.
Yep, totally. Yeah.
Or like, hey, let's try this on the solo. Oh, that sounds really cool. Let's put this effect on with this thing, and like it just leads to creativity. And that's one of the biggest things about going into a studio does. When you have somebody who can look at it objectively, who's technically proficient to make these things happen, who is skilled and experienced and knows the genre and knows what kind of things you can play around with in there, and now has the stuff in order to make this all happen, so that way you can just be creative and make what you want to make in the studio. That's where the real magic happens. That's where the fun in the studio happens.
Totally.
It ceases to become work, and it ceases to be like, man, these guys suck, to it's kind of cool. You know what? Like, hey, we're making something cool here. We're all, we're having a good time. We're jamming, making music.
Absolutely.
It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does. And all that stuff is brought to the table by working with a good engineer who is a right fit for you.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point. So now that we know we suck, but now that we know why we suck,
and we're necessary,
how do we improve our relationship with you? Or do you improve your relationship with us?
Either way, communication is a two-way street, man.
Absolutely.
You got to talk. Now, as the professional in the environment, if you're going to the studio and there's certain things that are necessary or needed, it does fall on the engineer to at least ask enough questions for them to do their job. But if there are unique things like requirements that you need for your studio, or things you want to try when you're there, or just things that you want them to know, it also falls on you to then over communicate what your expectations are, them to communicate with what their deliverables are, and have that agreement sit on going into it.
Yep.
We talk about communication all the time on this podcast.
Yes, we do.
And yeah, it's really important to have that clear communication, because if there isn't that channel of communication there, you're not going to make it art. You're not going to work well together. You're not going to work long together. You're not going to want to be like, hey, let's try this thing. Let's do that. And the engineer's not going to be responsive to it. They're not going to tell you, oh, well, let's not do it because of this. Or, oh, yeah, we'll give that a shot. Or, have you thought about doing this? Everything that we mentioned earlier, the perks of the objectivity, the perks of, what we talked about earlier, the perks of having someone with an objective view, it doesn't matter anything if they're not communicating it with you and you're not working together to make the best result of the combination of the two. I always think of, well, technically, when you go to a studio, it is like a service job. You come in, get recorded, you get your song back, you're done. That's your product, it's a service. At the end of the day, I personally view when I mix and when I record and when I work with artists, this is now a collaboration. Even though this is your art, you are trusting me and working with me, and I am going to put my flavor on it.
Absolutely.
But that's why you want to work with me, because I have a specific sound and a flavor of my mixes, of my recordings that are maybe desirable to you. And if you're going to collaborate, you're going to communicate.
Yep. Absolutely. Great point. And if you don't want them to do that, you're going to set an expectation with them. That's our next point. Setting expectations. This one has to do a lot with the goals and deadlines itself. And again, that lends itself to communication. But just making sure that there's like a detailed project plan in place to manage the effective time, or effectively manage time. Thank you. And make sure that you get the song out when you need it to go out, or the album, or whatever the case may be, right? Or you get stuff done within the studio session itself. Yeah, setting expectations is massive. And I think that obviously goes both ways, like Sean was saying. Like, it's important for the studio guy, the studio engineer, to set expectations with what he expects, but it's also important for you to set expectations with what you expect, right? That has to do with communication itself and how good your communication is. Most of the problems in life can be solved with good communication, right? If you communicate well, then you will have a much better time in life. I would be willing to say that, right? So just effectively communicate your positioning and just learn how the other person also communicates back, because that will help the bridge in between, right?
Sure.
So yeah, setting expectations though, very important to do. Very important to do. Do it up front, right?
Yeah.
Don't do it too late. If you do it too late, that doesn't count. That's just bad. That's bad.
Another thing you need to do to balance your relationship with your audio engineer is to kind of have a feedback mechanism, or just the expectation of feedback set up. And once again, I personally think this kind of falls on the engineer.
For sure.
There should be communication of, hey, this is how we're going to communicate revisions, this is how we're going to talk about the song, whether it be through email, text, phone call. When we're at the studio, having that open vibe of, yeah, tell me your ideas, let me know what works, what doesn't work. That is all incredibly useful and necessary in a creative process to actually like grow and move and make the song what it needs to be. And one of the big things that's always necessary, in my opinion, when you're working with an engineer, in order to actually get the best results and not overwhelm and not confuse and not yada, 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 is if you are in a band or you're in a group, contact them all and be like, hey, if you want to change or you want anything done or you have any ideas or feedback, we'll send them to one person first and have that be the point of contact for the engineer. Because then it's all in one thread, one email, or one contact thing that can just be looked at and be like, okay, these are all the changes that want to be made. This is what needs to be adjusted and yada, yada, yada. But you don't know what works and what doesn't. The engineer doesn't know what you like and what you don't like unless you tell them. And you don't know what the engineer can and can't do unless he tells you. And you have to have the feedback mechanisms in place in order to do that and iterate and iterate and iterate until you've got boom.
Totally. Well said.
Yep.
Well said. Last one that we got here is the one that we actually started out with, which is cost. But how do you manage costs? So budget management, got to be upfront about it. You have to be. If you're too late about this can burn bridges real quick, and it can lead to a lot of sour taste in a lot of people's mouths.
There's one thing an audio engineer does not want to be, and that's a debt collector.
That's right. Debt collecting sucks really bad. So you have to have the expectations that you put into place of kind of applied to budget management, right? I'm going to send you this invoice the minute after the session ends, or I'm going to send it the day after the session is completed, or you're going to need to pay half up front, pay half at the end, right? There are many ways to do it. Lots of people do it different ways, but you have to know how and when to pay, right? Not only that, but you got to tell the engineer, hey, I'm looking to spend this is within my budget. Can we meet this within my budget, right? And the engineer can adapt to what you need, right? As long as they're willing to. Not every engineer will be willing to do this, right? They might recommend you go elsewhere. They might tell you to fuck off. I don't know. It all depends on who the person is and what.
Nice for engineer and all.
Exactly.
Engineer.
Exactly. It all depends on who the person is and what they've dealt with and how shitty their day is going, right? So, but just being upfront about this will save so much headache at the end and a lot of broken hearts at the end, because either someone's not getting paid or someone paid too much or someone's not happy with the result or whatever the case may be. This can lead to so many bad things, and you definitely do not want that. I've been a part of it. I'm sure you've been a part of it at some point. And this also has to do with just having good communication up front. So a lot of this deals with communicating.
Communicate. Well, also, another thing is if you have the budgeting communicated and set aside at the start for the project, or like down payments or full payment or whatever it may be, it's on the table, it's been talked about, it's been agreed upon. So that helps remove that budgetary stress from the studio when you do go into record. Because the last thing your music needs is for your brain to be elsewhere during your performance. It's not going to be as good of a take. It's not going to lead to creativity. You're going to be focused on, we got to go quick. We got to make, like, within 2 hours, you got to record the full song. We got to do this and that. You're no longer in a mindset where you can create art. It's now fully a business thing.
It's fully transactional.
Yeah, fully a time management thing. Like, we've only got $800 that gives us this much studio time, so we got to go. Try to give yourself a little bit of breathing room, or communicate with the engineer ahead of time, like, hey, this is all the budget we have. Is there anything we can do, or is there a possible way that we can get extra time, or yada, yada, yada. Sometimes engineers will say no, which, as you said, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I'll give you two extra hours in the studio. It's just going to take me an extra week to get the mix back to you because it's going to be deprioritized now.
Yeah.
And maybe that works if you're not on like a strict time budget, but you want more studio time. It can be very beneficial. So just having that communication beforehand.
This is where becoming a cool hang really plays into it a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And being fun to hang out with and having a good time on the session and how you communicate and whether you're a fucking pain in the ass or not. That has a lot to do with it. And that goes with us too. It's the same boat over this way, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, so.
Life hack. If you become friends with your engineer, they'll just let you come in.
Wow, I don't know about that, but sure.
No, like not like to record to work.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you know, my session ends at 8 o'clock today. Yeah, you can swing by, let's just talk for a bit.
100%.
And like while you're chilling in the studio, obviously don't make it all about your music, because then they'll know like you're not actually here to hang, you're not actually here to be friends. But you know, you're in an environment, you work on music together, you both love music. Eventually the conversation is gonna go to that.
Exactly.
And it's like, yeah, you know, just out of your professional opinion, like, could we knock this out in 2 hours or do we need 3? Or like, yeah, you know, I'm struggling with this in work right now. Like, so I'm like saving up to do this. But the engineer will be like, well, I'd love to have you back in. So here's an example or whatnot. Or it's like, oh yeah, I'm working on mixing your song today. If you want to come in while I'm mixing it, you're more than welcome to do it.
Yep.
That's something that I do, like with clients that I really enjoy working with. It's like, hey, I'm working on your mix today. Like, hey, you know, available when I'm sorry, I don't really have any free time. But I'm working on mixing your song from 3 to 5. So if you want to swing by for a couple hours,
totally
chill and listen while I'm doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
Great
more
way
so
to
what
do
I
it.
mean. That's more so what I meant.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Not
I got
like-
you. No, I wasn't make sure.
Or for a day for free.
I wanted to make sure up front. You know, we were like, "Ooh, actually, no, I'm just kidding. But totally, yeah, totally agree. Yep, 100%, dude.
Oh yeah. Beep. Oh, what?
Something that happened?
It's not actually calling, is it? Okay, I clicked the emergency call button on my phone.
Oh, did you?
So I'm like, All right, so I'm just going to jump to conclusion on this. Because we've been going for a while.
We have.
Yeah. So basically, to summarize this episode, audio engineers suck, but they're necessary, and they don't have to suck.
Right.
You know, if you communicate well and you approach what you need to get done with them and tackle it together and work on it as a collaboration, it can be kind of a fun experience sometimes, maybe.
And like we said, this isn't always on you. You know, the engineer also has to be willing to meet you in the middle and do the same back to you. You know, it's just the relationship of it, you know? So don't feel like we're talking to you that you have to do this specifically. This also goes for your engineer. So if you have an engineer friend that needs to hear this, send them this episode.
And if you're going to the studio soon, or if your first time going into a studio, send them this episode too. Because just the expectation of like, there's going to be some things that are weird. Especially like the whole like antisocial thing. Like I try my best, but there's times where I'm just like a little like I'll be messing with stuff like, oh, I want to try this and do this, and like they're just pacing behind me, and I'm like, is this okay? Are we cool? Right? I'm still gonna talk. Okay, and they'll like play like, how's that? Like, oh, fuck yeah, that sounds great. I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah. That's why I talk to myself a lot when I'm doing stuff.
Oh yeah,
Because
focus on the music.
Yeah, it fills in the gap, and like I'm still being communicative at the same time. Like, oh, sorry, I'm just talking to myself. They're like, no, dude, I do the same thing. You know, it's like perfect, sweet. You know, so I'm definitely a little bit more extroverted. I would say probably in the studio. You know, most of the time, but I'm also doing a little bit more production at the same time too. So it's like I got to wear kind of both hats at the same time. So, but I do love my mixing days, man. I can just be by myself. I love those days, brother.
Yep. All right, so that's it. Episode's over. The only reason engineers suck is we were awful at ending segments and episodes for podcasts that we record.
Yep, we're terrible.
Yeah,
We suck.
we do entirely.
The next episode is why Sean and Brandon suck.
I could be like episode I might be like mid 100th episode,
That'd be funny.
because like we started off like our first episode was about us, and then like the 100 be like, wow, we're lame.
Let's do that.
Cool.
We're gonna write that down. You already know what episode 100 is gonna be. So tune in next year.
All right. So with all that being said, man, I feel like I should do a better transition. Yeah, hopefully this episode was entertaining to listen to and fun for you and yada, yada, yada. Part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this today and about why audio engineers suck is because, you know, occasionally we do like riff and rip into like bass players and guitarists and drummers and all that stuff. It's all in jest. We all are lame here.
Yep.
And audio engineers are no different. So from this point forward, we're probably going to shit on audio engineers.
Probably.
More, just because there's a lot of things wrong with it.
There is.
And it's okay. You know, that's why we wanted to make this episode of It's Okay. it's okay to talk about things that don't work and do work. And that builds good communication so that you can have more productive sessions and make better music moving forward. And one of the biggest recipes you can do in the audio industry to have success in this industry is to communicate and just go with an understanding of we're all people. There's good, there's bad. Let's work on it together. Let's make something awesome that will reach the audience and strike a chord and make something happen. But you're going to have a couple sucky experiences along that way.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Totally agree.
Appreciate it. So all that being said, thank you for listening to today's episode. If you want to contact us at Music Makers Cookbook, a podcast at musicmakerscookbook.com, you can. Let us know any sort of topics you want us to cover in the future. Let us know how much we suck. Tell us any bad engineering stories that you have.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear that. I'd be curious to hear those.
Yeah, so you can do that there, or you can DM us on any of our social media platforms. We have TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So you can reach out to us there. We also have some specific content that's only on those sources. But specifically, if you want to talk to Brandon, you can find him at
studio2recording.com. I didn't want to do the www this time, so I was very cognizant of that. You can go to my website there. You can contact me there. You can fill out a quote request form, and I will try to email you back within 72 hours. That is my promise. If you have something that you want to work on, whether it's recording, mixing, or mastering, hit me up. Let me know. I'd be curious to take a listen to it and see if we're a good fit for each other. And if you want to actually reach out to me on social media platforms, which I don't check as frequently, so I recommend going to my website. But if you want to go to the social media route, you can find me at Studio 222 Recording or at _Brandon McLeod on all social media platforms besides Twitter, because I don't use that shit anymore. Sean,
literally,
where can we find more information about you?
If you are an independent artist you're listening to the show, so anyway. If you make folk, rock, or acoustic music and would like to have it either recorded in your local, or you just want remote mixing and mastering, you can hit me up at swsrecordings.com, where I do remote mixing and mastering, as well as have my own studio in Novi. With that all being said, you can also find me on any social media platform at SWS Recordings. And also, if you want one-on-one coaching for a more accelerated growth in your music career, you can also contact me through that as well. It's basically this podcast, but more specified to your artist journey and what your goals are, and just an accountability partner and put things together to help you take those next steps to grow your career. And so if you have any questions, just kind of related to the industry or things that you want answered or whatnot, or just hit up a chat, you can also just message me there or send a message on any of the Music Maker Cookbook things. We like to talk to people, except for when we're in the studio and I'm super focused on my dial.
Yeah, when we're in the dark room tinkering around with our equipment.
It's funny because it literally is a dark room. I turn off
I turn off most of my lights too. Yeah, me too. Yeah. See, we practice what we preach. Yeah.
So that all being said, thank you for listening to today's episode. Thank you for sucking with us. And until next episode,
Bon appetit.